Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Meet the Parents podcast, where each week we bring you a mix of both mums and dads discussing a variety of parenting related topics. Real parents, real stories. I'm Tim, and tonight I'm joined by two of the younger members of the podcast team, who will no doubt reel me in when I start making pop culture references that predate when they were born. Yeah, I'm that old. So, good evening to Amy and to Dave.
Hello.
Evening, Timothy.
So this is a bit like the coaches lineup for The Voice, this, isn't it? With me in the Boy George role, and well, I guess the two of you can argue over which of Will, Ricky, and Paloma you want to be. Although personally, I think Dave makes the best Paloma. But there you go.
Well, I'm quite interested that you put yourself into Boy George's shoes straight away, Tim. Is there something that you've not told us?
It's only as
alter ego.
It's only as the elder statesman of the podcast, and I look great in big floppy hats.
I can imagine.
So, moving on this week's podcast, we're going to have a chat about the concept of speed mumming, and we're going to address the dual issue of both mummy and daddy guilt. So let's start this week by talking about a post Amy wrote recently about the parenting equivalent of speed dating. So as we talked about on last week's show, Amy's just moved out from London into the Shires, so you're going to have to go through the process of befriending local mums again. So talk us through the concept of speed mumming.
We'll call it speed parenting, given I'm the only girl on the podcast this week. It was actually a term I coined about a year ago. My daughter started walking and our outings changed considerably from pre-planned things like water babies or the local music class on a Wednesday morning, where you become a regular and you get to know the other regulars, and slowly over time you form those friendships with the other regulars, which there's a group of 5 of us where I used to live, and they're kind of my tight-knit group of mums, I suppose. Once your child is walking, you're kind of at their mercy and you're in the park and they just wander off, and it was a whole new world really, because I suddenly only had the attention span of Little Miss to make a good impression, to decipher whether or not this was somebody I wanted to exchange numbers with. Was it somebody that I thought I clicked with? Did I make enough conversation that it wasn't weird to exchange numbers? Or was I too standoffish? Or it was just, a year ago I spoke about the fact that I had no game whatsoever in the dating game 7 years ago when I was in it, let alone now with this whole kind of speed parenting thing. So yeah, the idea that I'm now back at square one, out in leafy green Hertfordshire, is pretty much my worst nightmare. So I went to baby group and I was actually really proud of myself. I did ask someone for their number, but the only thing that stemmed me to do that was that she, as part of the conversation, she dropped in that she was actually from North London. They'd moved out just before Christmas and she knew no one either. So I was like, perfect, you've got no friends, great. Which obviously I didn't say out loud. That wouldn't have been a good starting point, but that was kind of my thought process. But obviously I go back to work next week, so it was kind of speed parenting to the max, because I was like, God, I need to meet some people in this area quickly in this 1 week that I have before my daughter goes back to nursery. I go back to work, and it was like, I was very grateful for the coffee, Dave, by the way. Dave and I now live quite close together, so yeah, he made me feel like I had friends.
It was a proper parenting date, wasn't it?
It was. There was a climbing frame and everything for the girls, not us.
Yeah, so Dave, have you got any experience of this as a stay-at-home dad?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, everything Amy's just talked about is something I've been through. What I would throw into the spanner in the works, though, is being a dad, going to groups with just mums, you're automatically made to feel like you're on an actual date rather than just sort of this concept of mum and mum. It already feels like people are eyeing you up a little bit in terms of, oh, there's a dad over there, what's he doing here? So then if you then approach somebody and start conversation, it almost takes you back to being in a club, just without the alcohol. You know, when you start with conversations like, oh, you know, so do you come here often, and things like that.
Please tell me you don't say that.
And now I go with other things like put ice on the floor and stamp on it and say, now I've broken the ice.
This is just so far removed from my comfort zone, it's untrue. I mean, I don't think I was ever in the dating game. You talk about, you know, pick-up lines in the dating game like your "do you come here often?"
Do you live near here? Or do you work? Or how old's your child?
Yes, it's always got to be about the kid, hasn't it? That sort of seems to be the first conversation starter, because either the kid does something funny, or, you know, what I get a lot in classes is all of the other babies just sort of stare at me. But it means that the mums will often start conversation by saying something like, oh, he's just started saying dada, so he's now looking at men in a different way, or something along those lines. So it feels like whenever your child does something, that's the optimum point to start a conversation.
They're basically your wingman. That's how you have to think of them, is what I've come to the conclusion. They're kind of making the openings for you, and then you just have to take them.
You have to take advantage.
Now I'm getting this image, Dave, of Elle as being your goose to your maverick. Now,
I think it'd be frowned upon, though, going to a club with a baby, wouldn't it, though? You know, just imagine that baby wearing, and you're having a bit of a dance with a drink in your hand.
I bet when you go in and start singing "You've Lost That Loving Feeling" as a duet, that Elle is the senior part of that partnership.
The funny thing, though, is we're talking here about, well, my experience of going to places and speaking to mums, which, you know, I'm relatively comfortable with. Where I find myself getting more nervous is when there's another dad in the group, and you sort of think, oh, could this be my new best friend? It's another dad in the same situation as me. You know, we can bond over baby things. So you're having to play this fine line where, you know, you're being cool and you're being relaxed and chilled out, so you're not seeming too desperate. But at the same time, you're just going, oh, there's a man there. Maybe he'll be my mate.
I'm the same, but with younger mums.
So
I had Little Miss when I was 25, and so I was a little bit younger than the average. And as soon as I saw someone who looked remotely my age, it was like, oh my god, they might be my friend. Oh god, because I'd had a couple of really bad experiences with people basically ignoring me at playgroup and things because they thought I was 16. I do look young for my age, but I just thought it was rude. So I'm the same. I think anyone is the same as soon as you see anyone who might be remotely your type of person.
When you find that other dad in the playgroup, which often you're the only one, but if at most, if there is another one, it tends to be just the two of you, doesn't it? And there is that moment
Just
where you're
the two of us.
there is that moment, isn't there, where you're just sizing each other up and thinking, are you going to be my best mate forever, or is it going to be like rutting stags?
I think of it more as the first rather than the second. But I think what I do is, I was at a play group the other day, and I'd gone with a friend who actually is somebody who I met at Water Baby. So we went to this play group, me and him, and there was another dad there who runs it, who I know quite well as well. And then there was a random dad, so I was sort of looking at him a bit like, oh, you know, should I go over and talk? Should I stand off and wait for him to talk to me? So I sort of got his eyes after a little while and sort of nodded and was like, "You're right, mate." He sort of looked at me, nodded and said, "You're right," and that was it. We didn't talk again for the rest of the playgroup. So I don't think he's going to be my new best friend. He'll probably just be somebody I see and nod at.
Oh, now Amy, you wrote in your post that once you've gotten over that initial barrier of establishing contact with someone and exchange numbers, there's then the thorny issue of when you send the text to meet up for your next coffee date. What is the right amount of time to spend before you send the text? You know, where's that middle ground between looking desperately needy and looking completely uninterested?
That's the golden question, isn't it?
If any listeners know, please do get in touch. I waited 2 days last week, and I decided that I might as well take the plunge, only because with going back to work, I'm not really going to get a chance to see this woman at playgroups and things again. And she responded, and we had a back and forth of about 6 texts, which was nice, but I haven't heard from her since. I don't think that's... I don't know if she was just being polite, basically.
what I'd suggest is 2 days seems to be pretty decent. You know, you had a bit of rapport, you had some communication back. Just don't go to a house and knock on the door out of the blue. That'll get you a restraining order, not friendship.
And there speaks the voice of experience.
Tim, I had a question, because your kids are older than both mine and Dave's. Does it change as they get older? Like, do you actually find friends more easily at the school gates, or is that just as awful?
Oh, now that's a good question. Now, I think in some ways it can be more difficult because you can be trying to break into quite well-established social groups that were formed, you know, way back when in baby and toddler playgroups, and they may be less interested in taking on a new member, let alone a dad who they see hovering shiftily around the school gates, maybe, you know, once every few weeks or so, mostly nervously tapping out a tweet about how terrifying it is to be at the school gates. But then, you know, on the other hand, thanks to the fact that a number of neighbours have similarly aged kids at the same school, and, you know, to be honest, the speed mumming groundwork my wife has already done, you know, I will typically know a number of other parents there, so you never feel that left out. But yeah, it can be just as intimidating if you don't have any game other than, I don't know, a working knowledge of Minecraft. Now,
and this is why we're friends.
And which kind of reminds me that, you know, there's a scene in The Bourne Identity, stay with me, where Matt Damon's super spy character, who's suffering from amnesia, goes into a random cafe and tells the girl he's with that the moment they walked in, he immediately clocked where all the exits are, how many people there are, and which of them are left-handed. And that's how I used to be when I took one of the kids to a playgroup. So the first thing I would do would be to scan the room for other dads, usually none, then identify large pot plants or any other similar items that I could seek refuge behind, and most importantly, where the best spots for mobile reception were.
What you have learnt, though, is not to punch the other people in the room and beat them up.
Yeah, because I used to have that problem all the time.
Well, you do look a bit like Blofeld, don't you? So, is it Blofeld?
No, it's Oddjob. Thank you, Dave. Just watch for the bowler hat as it comes spinning your way. So, that's the Meet the Parents Guide to Speed Parenting. So, if you ever see any of us at a local playground or at the school gates alternatively, don't be afraid if we shuffle over nervously and say hi. We're just trying to see if you'd like to go out for a coffee or a play date sometime. Is your family home overrun with children's toys and books? Reclaim your space with the revolutionary new Tidy Away Room Drawerless Interior Storage, TARDIS for short. With its attractive retro police box exterior, its ingenious engineering means it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Get yours today. Disclaimer, only one available. One previous owner. Comes only in blue. Dave, you wrote a piece a little while ago about some of the things you've done as a stay-at-home dad that have triggered a bout of mummy guilt, or parenting guilt, I guess we should probably call it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so I wrote a post a while ago, having read a few different mummy blogger posts on this sort of phenomenon known as mummy guilt. So this is sort of basically the negative thoughts that many mums feel and experience because of what they do or what they don't do when it comes to their children. It struck me that this isn't just a mummy phenomena. This is something that I was experiencing too, and something I could totally relate to. I think being a stay-at-home dad myself, what I do is very much in the same realms as a stay-at-home mum. Changing nappies, getting food ready, cleaning the house, going a bit mental, all of these type of things. I'd say that Amy's probably experienced during the past 2 years of being home as well. So as part of writing this post, I explored a few different concepts of things that I felt guilty about. So as a few examples, putting Elle down for a nap early because she annoyed me, and I just needed a bit of time to myself. The fact that I sometimes use TV as a distraction when I'm trying to do a bit of work or need to, put the food on for tea or something along those lines. The fact that we spend a lot of our time in the house. Am I a letdown as a dad and as a parent because we're not out exploring Mother Nature every single second of the day? So they're the type of things that I experience as a dad, which I feel guilty about. I'm sure there's plenty of others. But what I did find is that a lot of mums were saying that it was refreshing to hear a dad talk about it. But what it also did was mean that other dads were coming out and saying, yeah, that's totally true from my experience, whether they're a stay-at-home dad, a single dad, or a working dad like yourself, Tim. So yeah, it was just basically about guilt and how it should be called parenting guilt. And just because we're different genders, it doesn't mean we necessarily feel differently.
As you say, we all suffer from some form of parenting guilt. I guess, Amy, you must be going through an interesting transition at the moment in moving from being a stay-at-home mum to returning back to work. How does that feel for you at the moment?
It's a really mixed bag for me. Obviously, it's been such a long road to getting back into work. I cried when they offered me the job, but the relief was just so much, and I felt no guilt at that point whatsoever, because I just felt like I've had so much longer than we ever anticipated off with my daughter, and there's so many parents out there who would kill to have the first 2 years of their children's lives at home with them, that I'm kind of grateful that I have had that time, even if it was unplanned and unexpected. And it's a really mixed bag. That being said, I touched on this before we started recording, but I had a bit of a meltdown last night as it starts to become real. It starts a week on Thursday, and it's like, but how do we manage a nursery run? And oh my God, we're not going to probably get to eat as a family. That's the bit that I feel the most guilty about, is that suddenly I think our family unit is really going to shift in terms of probably she'll be a single parent family during the week, because we've both got quite a long commute, so we'll have to alternate days and stuff. And I think I feel a lot less guilt going back to work than I would have done a year ago. Thinking back to a year ago, I think I would have felt guilty had I had a job to go back to, because they just seem so much smaller. Whereas now, she had her first proper day at her new nursery today, and she was just running away from me going, bye bye, bye bye. She was just thrilled to be there and to be, in a place where they play with her literally all day, and she gets to paint and make a mess, and I'm not panicking about the carpet in the rented apartment and things. It's great for her, and so I feel a lot less guilty than I probably would have done. I probably feel more guilty about being a parent blogger than I do about a working mum. Like this morning, oh God, the first time ever, I was horrified. I pulled out my camera she was all ready to go, and I put her by the front door and I said, just stand there, I want a picture of you before you go to your first day, proper nursery. And she went, no camera, no camera. I was like, what? No, we need photo footage that this day happened. Don't you understand?
Yeah,
it doesn't exist unless it's on Instagram.
Absolutely.
And then I was suddenly like, oh, that's an awful thing for me to think. What am I teaching her? We should be in the moment.
I think ultimately, the fact that people feel guilty shows that they care.
Yeah.
And, I'd worry about people who aren't feeling guilty, whether, everything you've just talked about, the examples I gave, it's all things which you feel because you want the best for your child. Ultimately, if you're feeling these type of things, it's because you care.
Yeah, I remember my grandma once saying to me, if you're worrying, you're doing it right. If you're not worrying, you're probably screwing them up. So I was like, okay, as long as I just can stay as a worrier, we'll be fine.
How about you, Tim?
Yeah, I think a lot of the points that you raise apply whether you're a working dad or a stay-at-home dad. I mean, for instance, we are constantly feeling guilty about, how much time we spend in the house versus going out, and, whether we should be getting out and doing more. But, I don't know about you guys, but we find that our kids are constantly on the edge of utter exhaustion. You've got school, preschool, various extracurricular activities, whatever we end up doing at weekends, and there are some Saturdays when they just need to be plonked down in front of the TV or quietly doing some painting or something like that, just to give them a chance to recharge. But you still feel guilty about that.
It's easy to forget that actually it's a long day for kids. They're up and out for kind of an 8:30 start. We expect them to do equally long days as we do, and we're knackered. It is a long day.
No, that's right. I think it's they're at their active days as well when they're at when they're at preschool. Often they're running around doing lots of physical stuff. At school, they're concentrating, doing lots of academic stuff, and it's a really long day. The other thing for me as a working dad is, I'm constantly juggling the demands of my job with the need to find enough time for the kids. So thankfully, I'm fairly flexible, and I don't have to travel too much with work, which means that probably 4 nights out of 5 during the week, I'll have at least a little bit of time with them in the evenings, and I get to do bedtime and stories and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But, I don't think you ever not feel guilty about how much time you spend with the kids, especially when you've promised to do something with one of them in the evening maybe, and then you get delayed in the office or you get held up in traffic and you end up disappointing them. And then on top of that, there's trying to make time for all the parents' evenings, the nativity plays, the school sports days and all that stuff. Between Heather and I, we try to make sure that at least one of us does every event, but it can be a challenge when you've got 3 kids. And I feel guilty about everything that I miss, and the fact that you can only talk to them about these things secondhand. It's a difficult balance, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where people will look at my situation and probably say, oh, you're a dad, you get to spend all day with Elle, that's great. And, it totally is. I'm not saying it's not. But the guilt that's replaced with should I be out working is just replaced with other things, on the minute scale, like I mentioned about, I'm feeling guilty because I've taken a Mars bar into the kitchen and eaten it behind her back so she doesn't steal a bit, or I've put her to bed for a nap earlier because I want to eat my cereal in peace without her snotty nose sticking to the spoon, that type of thing.
It really made me laugh when I read your post, Dave, and you said about you waiting to eat breakfast until later in the day. I was like, yeah, been there, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
You do just get a bit fed up with having to share
Yeah.
everything.
Nowadays, my days look like she goes down for a nap at 11. I'm eating by 11:05 and finish by 6 minutes past 11 because I'm so hungry by that point. And then she wakes up about 12:15, and then it's time for dinner. And it's like, well, I'm not even hungry. I only ate an hour ago.
So there you have it. In breaking news that I'm sure will come as a huge shock to all parents, it's tough being a mum or dad regardless of your individual circumstances. So yes, you're going to feel guilty, but take some comfort from the fact that you are far from alone. And next week, we solve world peace. So before we go, what have we all been up to recently? Amy?
Well, as I mentioned, Little Miss started nursery properly today. That went well. We've put our final piece of flat pack furniture together, which is just like, hallelujah. And I'm quite excited about the next thing. I'm kicking off a new series on my blog imminently. That's Finding Our Feet, to raise awareness of the issues we face as parents in the working world. This is off the back of the fact that, as I've kind of made no secret of the fact, I was made redundant on maternity leave and have spent the best part of the last 2 years basically trying to get my way back into the working world. And I have suffered discrimination in interviews and the interview process at both large and small companies. It's been an uphill battle. I wrote about it on the blog in October in a piece titled The Unemployed Mum, and it had a sadly fantastic response. I had women all over the world getting in touch with similarly sad or inspiring stories with happy endings of saying, they got made redundant, but then it led to something else or whatever. And I was blown away. It was lovely to feel like I wasn't alone in this situation, but equally that's not a happy thing. So as we've touched upon, I'm starting a new job, and my unemployed mum story, hopefully, touch wood, is coming to an end. But I don't want to stop trying to raise awareness of these issues because they are massive and sadly they're rife. And I would also like to try and change perceptions of working parents within the UK or around the world, whatever kind of happens. So the series that I'm kicking off is where I'm going to be sharing other parents' stories and the issues you're tackling in the workplace, but also the stories of employers that have got that mix right. So I'd like to share both sides of the story, basically, show the problems and hopefully some potential working solutions as well. So if you're a mum or a dad who has faced discrimination in the workplace for being a parent, whether that's during your pregnancy, arranging shared parental leave, were you overlooked for a promotion because you have a school run to manage? Is your story ongoing? Has it had an inspiring, happy ending where you've started your own business or found an employer who is supportive of having parents in its workforce? Whatever your story, I would really love to hear it. Please do get in touch. And I would also really like to stress, if your story is chosen to go onto the blog, it will be entirely anonymous. The aim of this is not to name and shame employers. It's not to put you in a difficult position as an employee. It's purely to raise awareness of these issues and try and educate employers, but also employees alike, as to how this can work. So please get in touch. My email is amycaitlin, AMIECAITLIN, @icloud.com, or you can get me on Twitter @FindingOurFeet, or Facebook message me via my Facebook page, Finding Our Feet blog.
Okay, and I'll add links to all of those addresses on the show notes over on meettheparentspodcast.com.
Thank you.
So Dave, what's been up with yourself?
Well, I thought I'd had quite a productive day, having got up and got dressed and left the house for 20 minutes. But after Amy's talked about that, I'm feeling like I need to up my game a little bit. No, that sounds great what you're doing, Amy. So I look forward to seeing more about that. For me, I've not really been up to much. I've been full of cold and snotty, just like the rest of the family at the moment. So just tend to be cleaning the settees of snot and things like that. Just the usual. Did go to London yesterday to see my folks who were down for a short break, which was quite nice. It's always good for them to hang out with Elle because unfortunately they don't get that much chance to see her with them being sort of 3+ hours away. From my perspective, doing a few vlogs at the moment, but just like I do with blogging, I've got about 6 different ones on the go at the moment, and just then doing more without actually finishing anything.
That sounds familiar. I looked in WordPress the other day and I think I had 94 posts in draft, of which probably 93 will never see the light of day, but
Jeez.
There you go. So what have I been up to? Parents' evening at the boys' school, thankfully nothing we didn't already know, and we also went into London at the weekend, as is traditional for us, to mark Chinese New Year with lunch in Chinatown and then a trip to the Tate Modern, because we are that middle class. And I've also started reading the Unmumsy Mums book, which is really unusual for me because one of the things that has disappeared out of the window since I started blogging and podcasting and all the other random stuff that I do is sadly I don't have as much time to read anymore. But I've been reading that, and that was sitting at number 5 in the Amazon bestseller list the last time I looked. Now,
really,
yeah.
Jeez, doing
Good
well
for her.
Yeah, I interviewed Sarah for the old podcast actually a few weeks back, so I'll drop a link for that in the show notes if anyone's interested. And that's it for episode 3 of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, if you just can't wait a full 7 days to get some more of us, here is where you can find each of the 3 of us online. So, Amy.
I am findingourfeet.co.uk, and you can find me on Twitter at findingourfeet.
And Dave.
I'm thedadventurer.com and on Twitter at @the_dadventurer.
And I'm at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com and on Twitter at ThatchamDad. So you can download this podcast from iTunes, our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. So do please also give us a follow on Twitter at Parents Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thanks for listening to the Meet the Parents podcast, and we hope you'll be back for more of the same next week. Good night.
Bye.
Night. Ciao, Bella.
Is that to me or Tim?